Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. If you're new here, pull up a chair, you're in good company. This is where I read the cancer studies most people never see and tell you, plainly, what they mean for your plate. No fear, no hype. So grab a coffee and let's look at this together. Today's one is cheap. It's already in most of your kitchens, and it comes with a catch that almost nobody tells you about. And that catch is the whole video. Quick note before we start. I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a researcher, not your doctor, and I've never had cancer or treated a single patient. Everything you hear from me is me sitting with the published studies and translating them into plain English for general education. None of it is medical advice, and none of it replaces your oncologist or whatever treatment you're already on. Take what's useful and bring it to the people who are actually caring for you. Now, here's the thing. There's a question I get every single week, and it always arrives the same way. Someone writes in and says, Dr. Becker, I've got a big jar of turmeric in the cupboard. I heard it fights cancer, so I've been putting a spoonful in a glass of water every morning. Am I doing it right? And every week I have to write back and say, I love that you're doing something, truly. But the way most people take turmeric, your body throws almost all of it straight down the drain. And that's not me being harsh. That's the actual science of how this spice moves through your body. So today I'm going to answer that question properly, once, for everybody. What the research really says about turmeric and cancer, and the simple, free trick that decides whether it does anything at all. Let me start with an opinion, before I show you a single study. If you're going to bother with turmeric, I'd rather you take it the right way 3 times a week than the wrong way every single morning. Because the wrong way, that spoonful in plain water is close to pouring it away. I'll show you exactly why and exactly how to fix it, and it costs you nothing extra. So, let's talk about what's actually in that yellow powder. Turmeric is the root, the ground-up rhizome, of a plant in the ginger family. The part everyone's excited about is one compound inside it called curcumin. Curcumin is the pigment that stains your fingers and your countertop, that stubborn orange-yellow. It's the star of the research. And I want to be careful and honest with you here, because this is where the headlines run way out ahead of the evidence. In the lab, and I mean this literally, cancer cells growing in a plastic dish. Curcumin does some genuinely interesting things. It pushes those cells toward what's called apoptosis. That's the body's built-in self-destruct button, the way a worn-out cell is supposed to quietly retire itself. Cancer cells are good at ignoring that button. In the dish, curcumin seems to help press it. It also interferes with angiogenesis. That's the process where a tumor grows its own little private network of blood vessels to feed itself. Cut off the supply lines and you starve it. That anti-angiogenesis effect, starving the blood supply, is exactly where the word starve in today's title comes from. But let me say that more carefully, because it matters. That is cells in a dish. That is not a tumor in a living person. When you hear starves cancer cells, the honest, grown-up version is, in laboratory studies, on cells in a dish, and in some animal work, curcumin nudged cancer cells toward self-destruction and interfered with the blood vessels they grow. The human cancer outcome data. Does turmeric on your dinner make you live longer, or keep a tumor from coming back? That data is not there yet. Anyone who tells you it is, hasn't read the papers, or is selling you something. I promised you plain English and no hype, so that's the line, and I'm going to hold it. So you might be thinking, all right, Becker, then why are we even here? Fair question. We're here because there's a second layer to this story, and it's the practical one. It's the reason your morning glass of turmeric water is mostly a waste, and the reason a tiny change turns it into something worth doing. Here's the catch. Curcumin is what researchers politely call poorly bioavailable. Bioavailability just means how much of a thing you swallow actually makes it into your bloodstream, where it can do anything. And curcumin is terrible. You eat it, and your gut barely absorbs it, and the little that does get in, your liver grabs and breaks down and flushes out almost immediately. There's a well-known human study where volunteers swallowed a full 2 grams of curcumin on its own. That's a heaping amount. And when researchers went looking for it in the blood afterward, they could barely find any. It was near undetectable. So that spoonful in plain water, your body is essentially escorting it out the back door before it can do a thing. And this is where the trick comes in. This is the right way I promised you. There's a study by a group of researchers, Shoba and colleagues, published back in 1998 in a journal called Planta Medica, and they tried a beautifully simple thing. They gave people that same curcumin, but this time paired with a small amount of piperine. Piperine is just the compound that makes black pepper taste like black pepper. That's it. Common black pepper. And with the piperine added, the amount of curcumin that made it into the bloodstream went up by around 2,000%, not 20%, 2,000, 20-fold. Now, let me put an honest fence around that number, because it's a big one, and I don't want you to run with it wrong. That 2,000% is measured against a starting point that was almost nothing. When curcumin's floor is near zero, it doesn't take much to multiply it many times over. It's a real, repeated finding, and it's the reason piperine shows up in nearly every curcumin supplement on the shelf. But it's a bioavailability finding. It's about how much gets into your blood. It is not, itself, proof that the curcumin then goes and does something to a cancer. Those are two different claims, and I'll keep them separate for you. What the pepper does is real. It's the front door. What happens after you're through the door is the part the science is still working out. So, here's how you actually put this on your plate, and it's almost insultingly simple. Whenever you use turmeric, add a crack of black pepper. That's the whole trick. A little turmeric, a little black pepper, together. That's the door opener, for pennies, and it's probably already sitting 6 inches apart in your spice rack. But there's a second half to doing it right, and it's just as important. Curcumin is fat-soluble. That means it dissolves into fat, not water. Which is another reason plain turmeric in water is the worst possible way to take it. So you want to take it with a little fat. A spoon of turmeric stirred into some warm milk with a swirl of pepper. That's the classic golden milk. And it's genuinely one of the better ways to take it, because you've got your fat and your pepper in one warm cup. Or stir it into a pot of soup with a drizzle of olive oil, or into scrambled eggs, or over roasted vegetables you've tossed in oil, or into a bowl of yogurt with pepper. The pattern is always the same. Turmeric, a crack of pepper, a little fat, ideally a little gentle warmth. Get those three things together, and you've gone from pouring it away to actually absorbing it. Let me put that on your plate before we go on, because I want this to be doable across a whole ordinary week, not just once. Here's how I'd actually work it in if it were my kitchen. Some mornings, turmeric goes into scrambled eggs. The eggs bring the fat. You crack in the pepper. Done. You barely notice it. Other days, it's a warm bowl of lentil or vegetable soup with a drizzle of olive oil and pepper stirred through. A couple of evenings a week, the golden milk before bed. And when I'm roasting a tray of vegetables, they get tossed in oil, turmeric, and pepper before they go in the oven. Notice something. In every single one of those, the fat is already there and the pepper is a 2-second addition. I'm not asking you to choke down a spoon of powder. I'm asking you to season your food the way people have for 1,000 years. And just remember the pepper. That's the realistic dose. That's the realistic frequency. A few times a week, woven into meals you were eating anyway. Nobody sustains a daily ritual they hate. Everybody can crack pepper into their eggs. Let me tell you about someone this landed with. I sat with a woman last autumn. I'll call her Dot. She's around 70. At a small community talk I gave. And Dot came up afterward, almost embarrassed, and she told me she'd been faithfully drinking a mug of hot water with a heaping spoon of turmeric stirred into it every single morning for 2 years. 2 years. Because her sister had been through a cancer scare, and Dot was frightened and wanted to do something with her own hands. And when I gently explained that plain water turmeric barely gets absorbed, her face just fell. You could see her doing the math on 2 years of mornings. And then I told her the fix took 10 seconds, a crack of pepper, and stir it into her morning oats with a splash of milk instead of into water, and the relief on her, honestly, has stuck with me. She wasn't wrong to care, she just needed the door opened. And that's most of you writing in, I think. You're not wrong to try. You just want the version that works. Now, I know what some of you are already thinking. You're thinking, this is just another spice fad. Becker, next week it'll be something else. And you know what? That's fair. That's a completely reasonable thing to think, because you've been burned by 100 miracle foods. So let me test it honestly with you rather than just cheerlead. The turmeric story is not a fad in one specific sense. The bioavailability science, the pepper and the fat, that part is solid and boring and repeatable. Where the hype lives is in the leap from a dish to a diagnosis. So let's hold both truths at once. The absorption trick, real. The cancer cure, not a thing. Keep those two straight and you won't get fooled. Because here's what the actual human research on curcumin looks like, and I want you to hear the shape of it clearly. Most of the human trials, and there are quite a few now, have not been about curing cancer. They've been about inflammation and about early, precancerous markers. There's a line of small trials in people with colorectal changes, things like aberrant crypt foci, which are tiny abnormal clusters in the lining of the colon that can be an early warning sign. And in some of that work, at fairly high doses, a couple of grams a day and up, curcumin nudged some of those markers in a favorable direction. Now let me say that more carefully, because I can feel myself getting ahead of it. Those are small studies, measuring biomarkers, not lifespans. A biomarker moving is a promising hint. It is not a person avoiding cancer. The trials themselves say so, plainly, and I respect the researchers who kept their language honest. It's early, it's interesting, and it is not a green light to skip your colonoscopy. And let me be straight with you about the doses for a second, because it's the honest catch on this whole topic. Those human trials used grams of curcumin a day, a concentrated extract, way more than you'd ever get from cooking. The turmeric you shake into your soup is a lovely, anti-inflammatory, absolutely worth doing culinary habit. But it is not the same as the gram-level doses in the trials. I won't pretend your curry delivers a clinical dose, because it doesn't. What your curry does deliver, done right with pepper and fat, is a real, absorbable amount of a compound with genuinely interesting biology, as part of an overall pattern of eating that leans hard toward plants. That's the honest frame. Small lever, pulled consistently, not a magic bullet. Which brings me to the part I will not skip, because it's about your safety, and this is where I have to slow you right down. This golden spice is not automatically harmless just because it's natural, and this matters most for the very people most tempted to megadose it. Here's my honest read. Curcumin thins the blood a little. It has a mild blood-thinning effect. On its own, with food, that's nothing to lose sleep over. But if you are already on a blood thinner, a prescription anticoagulant, or even daily aspirin your doctor put you on, piling concentrated turmeric supplements on top can add up in a way that raises your bleeding risk. That is a real, documented interaction, not a scare story. The other one. Curcumin makes your gallbladder squeeze and pump out bile. Good for most people. But if you have gallstones or a blocked bile duct, forcing that gallbladder to clamp down can genuinely land you in real pain, or worse. So, if you're on blood thinners, or you've got gallbladder trouble, or you're heading into any surgery, this is a conversation with your doctor before you touch a curcumin capsule. Never instead of the food on your plate, the pinch in your cooking. That's a different, gentler world than a high-dose supplement. Don't confuse the two. Now, let me build on that, because a lot of you are going to ask the very next question. Becker, should I just buy a supplement then and skip the cooking altogether? And I'll tell you what I'd actually do before I tell you what the label tricks are. Personally, for prevention. For a healthy person just trying to eat well, I lean toward the food, the cooking, the golden milk over a capsule. It's cheaper, it's gentler, it's food, and you get everything else that comes with real turmeric instead of one isolated extract. That's my honest bias, and I'll own it. But if you do go looking at supplements, Let me at least make you a smart shopper, because that aisle is full of nonsense. Here's what actually matters on a curcumin label. First, it should say it's paired with something for absorption. The commonest is piperine, sometimes sold under a branded name, which is just that black pepper compound we talked about, standardized. Some use a special fat-based or particle formulation instead, with names that sound like science fiction. And to be fair, some of those genuinely do improve absorption. The point is, a plain curcumin capsule with nothing to help it across. That's the same near useless story as turmeric in water, just more expensive. Second thing, watch the dose and be sensible. The trials I mentioned used grams a day, but they used them under supervision, measuring people's blood and their livers. That is not a license for you to go buy the biggest bottle and megadose at home. More is not automatically better, and it's exactly the high-dose supplement, not the pinch in your cooking, that runs into the blood thinner and gallbladder cautions I gave you. So, if you go the capsule route, that's the route where you loop in your doctor first, especially if you're on any medication. The kitchen is forgiving. The supplement bottle is where people get themselves into trouble. Let me give you one more genuinely useful cooking detail, because it's the kind of small thing that separates doing this right from doing it almost right. A little gentle heat helps curcumin dissolve and get into that fat and pepper, which is another quiet argument for the golden milk and the soup, and the sautéed version over a cold sprinkle. You don't want to scorch it, you're not deep frying it, and boiling it hard for a long time isn't doing you favors. But warming turmeric in a little oil or milk, the way it happens naturally when you cook, is genuinely part of the trick. So the full picture, the right way in one breath, is turmeric plus a crack of black pepper plus a little fat plus gentle warmth. 4 things, all of which happen automatically the moment you cook with it instead of stirring it into cold water. That's why every traditional cuisine that leans on turmeric, they've been frying it in oil with pepper and other spices for centuries. They didn't have the Shoba study. They just had grandmothers who knew it tasted right that way. The lab is only now catching up to the kitchen. And I want to give you a sensory picture of what that looks like because I think it makes it stick. Picture a small pan, a spoon of oil warming, and you sprinkle in the turmeric and it blooms. The color deepens, the smell turns warm and earthy and a little peppery, and the kitchen goes gold for a second. That bloom, that little sizzle in the fat, that is the absorption trick happening in front of you. Now picture the alternative. A spoon of yellow powder swirled into a glass of cold water, sitting there in a cloudy layer, refusing to dissolve, sinking to the bottom. One of those is your body getting the compound. The other is your body getting a stained glass. Same spice, completely different outcome. That difference is the entire reason I made this video. So here's your one thing this week, and it costs you nothing. You already own turmeric and black pepper. The only change I'm asking for is to stop taking turmeric in plain water forever and start taking it with a crack of pepper and a little fat instead. Simplest version of all, golden milk. Warm a cup of milk, whatever milk you like, stir in about a half teaspoon of turmeric, a good crack of black pepper, and if it's dairy milk, you've already got the fat. If it's a plant milk, add a tiny splash of olive oil or a spoon of yogurt. Warm it gently, don't boil it, drink it in the evening. Or, even easier, just get in the habit of cracking pepper into anything you already put turmeric in. Your eggs, your rice, your soup, your roasted veg. Pepper plus fat plus turmeric. That's the right way. That's the whole video in one sentence. You hold one lever every single day, 3 times a day. Your plate. And that's not nothing. You can't control everything about cancer. Nobody can. And I'd never tell you otherwise. But you can control whether the turmeric you're already eating actually gets absorbed, and you can control that it goes in as part of a plant-heavy way of eating you keep up for years. Do the doable thing, consistently. Bring it to the people caring for you, and let them do the rest. That's the whole game. Keep it simple. Keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this, and do me a favor. Tell me in the comments, whether you've been taking your turmeric in plain water this whole time. Be honest, no judgment. I just want to know how many of us needed this one. I read every single one. And if you want the full list of how I'd actually build an anti-cancer plate, the real research version with no hype, I've put it together in a free guide I'll point you to below. Take care of yourselves.